Now in Game Week 29, many managers are going to look to use the free hit chip, and in today's video, I'm going to give you the ultimate guide and the best team for this game week. Now, before we dive into today's video, of course, if you do enjoy any of the content that you see on the channel, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as we are trying to hit 12,500 subscribers by the end of the season, and it is only possible with your guys' amazing support. As you can see on screen right now is the 11ify data that I usually use in the transfer targets videos. Of course, it will be in that video when that drops tomorrow morning, but just for this week, I think it's going to be really useful just to look at, of course, Game Week 29 in terms of the clean sheets and in terms of the projected goals. Of course, if you want to go and check out 11ify's amazing website, a link as always will be in the description for that one. So with our free hit, of course, it does just focus on Game Week 29 if you've never used the chip before. So we're wanting to target the best teams for clean sheet odds. And as you can see here, Arsenal are leading the way with a 42% chance of a clean sheet with their fixture against Chelsea. Of course, Manchester City are home against Brighton, a 35% chance as well. So definitely I think Guardiola is going to be on a lot of people's radars as well. Forest, of course, Ipswich away, a decent fixture in their strong defensive record this season. I definitely think people like Aina, Sells, Nico Williams, Mikalenkovic, there's so many good defenders that you can pick from there. Of course, Everton as well, been really, really good this season, despite, you know, the position they've been in at times this in the league, under both Moyes and, of course, Dyche have been very, very solid defensively. A 34% chance for them as well, and a 28% chance for Wolves with a pretty decent fixture for them coming up as well. Outside of that, I don't think there's probably going to be any other teams I maybe would consider. Probably Manchester United with a 31% chance, but I think the way that United are kind of playing at the moment, I don't think they're personally, for me, going to be a team I'm going to focus on defensively. I'm more interested potentially in one or two of their attackers coming up. Let's move on then to those projected goal numbers from 11ify. As you can see, City and Arsenal, the two leading candidates. City with the best one, so I think, you know, options like Haaland are definitely going to be ones that I feel if you run the free hit this week have to be a pretty much must. I think with now Cunha suspended for this game week, I think that makes him the clear and obvious captain. You could also go Chris Wood, but I probably would just stick with Erling Haaland for me personally. Arsenal's numbers are decent despite a difficult game on paper against Chelsea, so maybe somebody like a Nawari, a Trossard could be really, really good options. Bournemouth are very, very decent against Brentford, who are statistically one of the worst sides for XG conceded in the league, so maybe somebody like a Cliver definitely could be worth some sort of consideration as well. We're seeing Chelsea's numbers actually be the lowest on this list. Now, one of the original drafts that I was kind of playing around with this afternoon did have Cole Palmer in. However, upon reflection and seeing these low projected goal numbers, I have now switched it out for a different player with better projected goal number odds heading into this game week. Finally, before we head into the team itself, let's take a look at the Fantasy Football Hub predicted points heading into Game Week 29. Like I said, Haaland is clear on this metric, and I think he has to be a player that you've got to have if you were to, of course, go with the free hit for this game week. I do think he's just the best captaincy option. I know he didn't look great today against Nottingham Forest. However, I do feel like Brighton is a little bit more of an easier task, to be honest, than Nottingham Forest. Palmer second, despite, obviously, as we saw in the last section, difficult projected goal numbers coming up for Chelsea in that game. So maybe the Fantasy Football Hub model backs him a little bit more. However, I think I want to watch him play and perform tomorrow before I kind of make any sort of decision on whether or not I would include him in a free hit. Semenyo and Foden are both players that the Hub kind of predictor points tool absolutely loves and adores, so I maybe would kind of skew away from that one. Chris Wood, again, one of those players I think has got to be the first name on the clean sheet. And then we've got Bruno Fernandes as well, a really, really good player. We saw some decent projected goal numbers coming up with that fixture for Manchester United away at Leicester as well. Then we've kind of got, I would say, your kind of alternative picks kind of just scattered throughout the team. Kind of differential options that you, of course, potentially could go for. Interestingly, though, no Ait-Nouri, who I know is going to be a very, very popular player heading into this game week. I do find it very interesting that the Fantasy Football Hub model doesn't have him in the top projected points, but I think he'll still be one of those players that has super high effective ownership for this week. That, of course, was the data and the predicted points heading into Game Week 29. Now, let's dive in to that free hit draft. Waste no time, let's dive into the free hit team selection then. Starting off first with our goalkeepers and defenders. We're going to start off with Jordan Pickford in goal. I do feel it is probably a toss-up between him or Jose Sarr. Maybe with our backline we could put Gabriel in there and then get Jose Sarr as our kind of cover off in terms of that. However, Everton, as we saw on the 11-5 models, have really decent projected clean sheet odds heading into this game week, and Pickford's been a very solid goalkeeper throughout this year, but obviously Jose Sarr would be my preferred other option if you were to consider any other ones. As I suggested earlier on, I do think Aït-Nouri is going to be a very popular pick in kind of amongst the FPL community and of course content creators over the next few weeks. There's very good reason for that. We saw the clean sheet odds were okay, but of course Southampton are the worst team in the Premier League. They're on course to be one of the worst teams in Premier League history, and I do feel like somebody like Aït-Nouri, we have to take full advantage of that. He, of course, can get himself attacking returns. We all know what this lad is capable of. Massively passes the eye test anytime you do watch his performances. Obviously, I'm filming this before the Wolves game tonight, so if he does pick up an injury, of course, I would suggest potentially bringing in one of our other defenders on the bench. We saw Nottingham Forest have some of the best clean sheet odds, again, on the 11-5 model. That is kind of, we've got this 1 week punt. We need to just be focusing on these individual game weeks. Of course, Nottingham Forest have been very consistent with their clean sheets so far this season. One of the best sides for XG conceded across the whole course of the Premier League season. An assist as well, not an assist, sorry, a clean sheet today for him against Manchester City as well. If you can't afford Aina, because I do know his price has obviously risen a lot over the past few weeks, I would suggest maybe looking at somebody like a Nico Williams. You've got Sarr as the goalkeeper option as well. You could also potentially go down the route of somebody like a Mikalenkovic, a Williams. There's plenty of decent other cheaper options within that Nottingham Forest side as well. The final option is going to be Gvardiol. Now, he's currently sat second in terms of expected goal involvement per 90 amongst defenders, and again would be one of those players that I'd absolutely be gagging to get into the side. Again, with the 11-5 data, we saw that Manchester City were the second best for clean sheet odds heading into this game week. Our defenders on the bench then, we've got Gabriel. I think you could obviously put him in here, but it would be a really difficult call. Which way do you potentially go with that one, and who obviously do you go with to kind of drop him out with that back line, to be honest, because I think the midfield and the forwards is a very stacked position. But of course, Gabriel could be a great option to go for. We saw with the 11-5 data, top for clean sheets heading into this game week. I just think it's going to be really hard to dislodge him out of any of those other ones. And then we saw Bournemouth as well. They had pretty decent odds on the 11-5 model. And again, he's just there to cover up and make the numbers. Kirkez also could be a decent shout, but I think ahead of the three defenders we've got in there, I don't think either of those guys get a sniff for me personally, but I'd be interested to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Let's move on then into the midfield. We're going to start off first with Bruno Fernandes, and this midfield is very penalty kind of eccentric heavy. Bruno Fernandes against Leicester, it's a great fixture, one of the best ones you can have on the calendar this year. Of course, Manchester United aren't in the best place, but Bruno still has been a very decent performer. Plays 90 minutes on penalties, takes a lot of their free kicks, corners, everything kind of goes through him, and that is the reason that I've selected him. I think penalties are just such a big thing to go for. If you don't fancy him, I think, potentially somebody like a Jared Bowen could also be a really decent shout with that Everton fixture on the Saturday at 3 o'clock if you didn't fancy going for Bruno Fernandes. And Mbeumo is playing at the time of me recording this, so again, if he does pick up any injuries or anything like that, please, of course, do avoid him. But again, very similar situation. He's a penalty taker. He's a 90-minute man. It's not the most ideal fixture. We didn't see Brentford as one of the top teams for projected goals, and we also didn't see Brian up there in terms of the predicted points on that Fantasy Football Hub list in the last section. However, he's just one of those players that I think, again, is a talisman of the side, and that's kind of what this midfield is built around, those talisman, or at least the first four players are. Bruno and Mbeumo, Kluivert, Palmer, all the big men for these sides. All the penalty takers and a lot of free kick and corner responsibilities also fall down on these guys as well. As you can I kind of bigged Kluivert into that one already. Hasn't played in game week 28, so of course, do just make sure he does make it through. But again, we saw that they've got some of the better projected goal numbers on that 11-5 model. They had Semenyo extremely high up there, and kind of the other midfielders as well for Bournemouth, also pretty decent on that Fantasy Football Hub predicted points list. But I think, he could be a really good shout. Palmer's the interesting one. Now, he's only made it in here because he's sat in second. That's the only reason he's made it in there. He's second on the predicted points list. But I definitely think, like I said, you could drop him out for, of course, players that we've got on the bench. Or, of course, for those, maybe somebody like a Jared Bowen, who we obviously spoke about with Bruno Fernandes. The reason I've kept him in is I do think he does have that ability to, of course, go and get an absolute mega haul. And I think the main reason that I probably would potentially be tempted to keep him in as well is the people that aren't free hitting this week, most will probably still have Cole Palmer. So he's still going to have really, really high effective ownership. And I think that's something that you've got to be maybe aware of. He's super highly owned. A lot of maybe the dead teams that you're trying to catch up on, or people in your mini leagues that have kind of not got a free hit in hand or a delay in, probably are still going to have Cole Palmer within their side. So I think I probably would maybe just keep him just purely to kind of battle off any sort of effective ownership kind of doom and glooms for this week. Anthony Elanga's an interesting one, and you might be like, Tom, that doesn't seem quite right. Now, the reason I put Anthony Elanga in here, watching the Forest game today and watching a few Forest games as well, you've noticed that the kind of corner and free kick responsibilities have actually been taken away from Morgan Gibbs-White. And Anthony Elanga is taking a super big amount of these. And I think for 5.3 million, a decent fixture, he looked really, really good. I think he could be worth a little bit of a gamble. You've always got to have one player, I would say, that is just a bit of a gamble on a free hit. And I think for me, Anthony Elanga feels like that player, if I was to free hit this week, that of course would be the gamble that I, of course, would go for. Moving in then to our free forwards, we're going to go with the player who had the highest predicted points on the Fantasy Football Hub model. It is going to be Erling Haaland. And as well, he also had the best projected goal numbers on the 11FI data we saw as well for Manchester City. That's why I've made him captain. Of course, it hasn't been his season. The Forest performance today was very, very disappointing. But I still think he's a really, really good player. And I think for me is an easy captaincy option. Probably him, Bruno or Palmer are probably going to be wrestling with each other. If you're fancying a differential, maybe it's the man next to him with 21 goal involvement so far this season. It is Chris Wood. Again, just another talisman. I think that's what we've got with a lot of these players. Bruno and Mbeumo, Kluivert, Palmer, Haaland, Wood, all for me a talisman, all take penalties, all have a lot of other responsibilities that they can pick up points from, and are all bonus points magnets, get my word out as well. So that's why I've selected those guys. And then finally on the bench we do have Johan Visser. I don't think it's the easiest fixture. Of course, you maybe could look at somebody like a Beto, who's quite high up on that predicted points list, or maybe somebody like a Strand Larsen, purely if you wanted to just target that Southampton fixture, considering how poor they've been defensively this season and how woeful their Premier League record has been. That was my free hit guide ahead of blank game week 29. Let me know what you think of it down in the comment section below. Of course, if you've got any questions about your team as well, get them in as we'll try to answer as many as we possibly can. But thank you for watching today, ladies and gentlemen, and good luck in blank game week 29.